Hello, and welcome to the first of three lectures on Period 9, the last period in AP US history, and we'll call this the Contemporary United States, or the United States Today. And this period begins in 1980 and ends with today, and it begins in 1980 with the election of Ronald Reagan to President of the United States, which comes to key concept 9.1, which is what this lecture is about. A newly ascendant conservative movement achieved several political and policy goals during the 1980s and continued to strongly influence public discourse in the following decade. So this one's to do with the national government, in particular the president and the policies initiated by Reagan, and which are still very much the norm today. So the first one, the first sort of subcategory, conservative beliefs regarding the need for traditional social values and a reduced role for government advanced in U.S. politics after 1980. So conservatives, there's two types of conservatives. There are fiscal conservatives, and they are concerned with monetary and tax policies and government policies. They want low taxes, small government. They don't like regulations, and they see government as the problem, not the solution to society's problems and issues. And the fiscal conservatives in the United States, they were very much appalled by the rising debt that came in the 1960s and 1970s from the Vietnam War, and also because of the social programs of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, and even some of the long-entrenched New Deal programs and regulations as well. They want to roll back these things and reduce the role and responsibility of the government, and in so doing also reduce taxes. The other kind of conservatives are social conservatives, and they're concerned with more, social issues, especially issues of sexuality and gender roles and family. And they were very much led by a person, they advocate family values. They're led by one of the leaders, Jerry Falwell, and what was dubbed the moral majority. From their viewpoint, the majority of Americans adhere to their values, and their values. They're looking at the things that are coming out of the 60s and 70s, and they're very much opposed to it. The liberation movement of women, the women's rights movement, they feel that women should stay in the home, and mom should care for the children, and dad should go off to work. They're concerned about sort of rising divorce rates, the sexual revolution, the availability of birth control, advocates of advocates of free love, the gay rights movement. They're also, reacting to the violent upheavals of the anti-war movement and some aspects of the civil rights movement as well. And they backed up Ronald Reagan in the election of 1980, and they endorsed him and strongly endorsed Ronald Reagan for the presidency of the United States. And this group of people, evangelical Christians, they'd really stayed out of politics and society since the 1920s, when they'd been thoroughly embarrassed in the Scopes monkey trial, as it was so called. But now they're sort of coming out of the woodwork and finding a very strong and political voice, and they continue to be a bedrock of the Republican Party today, these sort of social conservatives. And so Reagan wins in 1980, and he wins big, and he'll win even bigger in 1984 with his re-election. And why was there such strong support for Ronald Reagan? Well, Americans at the time, they were looking for a fresh and optimistic, can-do kind of leadership, and Ronald Reagan was sort of offering that. The 1970s was a really dark time in American society and politics. Rising inflation, the oil crisis, the hostage crisis, the scandals like Watergate, and the weakness of the country being kicked around in Vietnam. And in general, there was just a gray malaise that Jimmy Carter was not able to sort of correct in any ways. And in fact, a lot of people saw Jimmy Carter as just being very gray. And Reagan, he looked and sounded confident and optimistic with his slogan, "We can make America great again." And he very much invoked in the campaign the city on a hill, and return America back to being that city on the hill. And it's this optimism, more than really anything, is what got him elected. There's a county-by-county look at it as well. Red, Republican; blue, Democrat of incumbent President Jimmy Carter. So Ronnie, as he was affectionately called, he was a very personable, affable person. He was known as the great communicator. He was the oldest president. As a child, he was a New Dealer and an admirer of Democrat FDR. And he was a Hollywood actor, never a superstar, but a recognizable face in America from the 1950s. But he sort of left acting and became a corporate spokesperson, particularly for General Electric. And in 1964, he had his real coming out when he endorsed the conservative ticket of Barry Goldwater for the Republican nomination. And Goldwater was seen as this maverick radical even of his these conservative values that he was running on. And Reagan gave a speech at the convention that is simply known today as the speech, which is seen as the beginning of the conservative movement, and then with him being elected, the culmination of it. So Reagan's policies, he's going to advocate tax cuts, deregulation of environmental and financial rules in Wall Street and for corporate America, increase the military spending, rollback of communism. We'll get to that in the final lecture. Advocacy of these family values, and war on drugs as well. Now, his economic policy, which is known as Reaganomics, which is lower income and capital gains taxes. Those are capital gains is money that you make, say, investing, playing the stock market, these kinds of things. Deregulation, as I said, and then this will lead to reduced government spending, cut back spending on healthcare, education, social services, and limit the money supply. Higher interest rates to suck money out of the economy and into the banks as a way to curb inflation. Now, this cutting back on government spending did not apply to the military, and a lot of criticism for this. Now, Reagan wanted a strong military that could confront the United States confront the Soviet Union and sort of force the Soviet Union to try to outspend as well as part of his Cold War policy. And yeah, he got a lot of criticism for this, as here he is at the dance, and who's he dancing with? He's dancing with defense, who's fat and ugly, and who's sitting on the sideline, wanting to dance is, the cities and the environment and Social Security. And so the criticism that, he's ignoring these things like Social Security and environmental issues, and spending all of his energy and his time and money on this fat and ugly military beast. So his economic legacy, well, a combination of tax cuts and increased military spending led to huge deficits and increased debt. And he increased the national debt by more than all previous presidents combined, while also cutting government services, weakening regulations, and weakening unions. Yet, ironically, this debt helped to achieve his sort of goal of reduced government involvement, because future leaders, when they sort of advocate, a new healthcare plan or a new social services plan, the critics will say, well, we can't do that. We can't spend money because of this huge debt. And we should instead be focusing the nation's resources and tax dollars on reducing the debt. And military spending continues today to be seen as an essential part of government spending. For his successors, and poly debates have continued over free trade agreements and the scope of the government's social safety net and calls to reform the U.S. financial system. Now, Clinton and Obama, when they were president, they both faced hostile Congresses and were really unable to reverse the trends towards lower taxes, less government regulation, and social spending. Obama's Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, which was a health care initiative to get most Americans onto a healthcare insurance plan. That's an exception to this, and that was a major domestic policy achievement early in Obama's presidency. When he did have a stronger support in Congress, he's able to get this back. All these presidents have all backed free trade, reducing tariffs and urging global liberalization trade policies. Now, George W. Bush Jr., he also initiated really deep tax cuts, especially to capital gains and to the wealthier people. And he initiated a long and expensive war. Like Ronald Reagan, spent a lot on military, and the debt increased considerably under his presidency. Now, finally, during the presidency of Bill Clinton, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was signed, and this created this sort of pink free trade area there of reduced tariffs and between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and essentially creating one large market for both labor and for the selling of goods. And this is the trend really from the 1980s, maybe even a little earlier, of increased free trade and across the globe, and not just limited to the United States itself. Okay, we're going to end it right there. Thank you very much.